One of DDAM's strongest capabilities is the reporting feature. In another module I already covered the DNS reports, but in this section we're going to cover the DHCP reports. And again, there's a couple of DHCP chart-based reports and also a number of table-based reports. Now the first one is the DHCP lease rate, which is just a general DHCP throughput. But again, as mentioned in the DNS reports, what DDAM does is it actually summarizes all of the DHCP traffic across all nodes by default. Now we can break that down in the usual way by selecting breakdown by node, and what it will do is it will give us a breakdown of the DHCP traffic for each of the nodes that's being monitored in the system. Now some of the nodes aren't generating any DHCP traffic, so the graphs will be empty, but we can see here's the traffic for Mars and Phobos, which is our backup DHCP server. I can select those particular charts, those particular nodes. So if I select Mars and Phobos, what I'll see is the data just for those two nodes. Indeed, here we go. And I can select the periods. So if I'm interested in looking at a particular period, now 8 o'clock is normally an interesting one because people come in to the office and you start seeing, in theory, here we go, the DHCP traffic increase as we get towards 9 o'clock. Now we've got a small environment here, so only a small number of DHCP packets are being seen at any one point in time. Now we can do a breakdown of the DHCP packets by type. So this is similar to the DNS queries by type chart, where basically we can see the the different types of DHCP packets. Now if we go back to the beginning of the day again, we should hopefully see some discovers. Let's have a look. Yep, there we go. So what we see here is all the different types of DHCP packets on the network, the majority of which are acknowledgements, which is what you'd expect. If we hover over a data point, you can see at any particular point in time the number of packets that were received. So in this case, 8:47, for that minute there were 14 acknowledgements seen. If we go to yesterday and get an hourly breakdown, we should probably see that most of the DHCP traffic occurred in the morning. There we go. So you can see here between 7 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the morning is when most of the DHCP activity occurred. We've also got some charts which help us with reclaiming unused subnets and scopes. So this first one here, DHCP scopes. A scope is basically a start and end address, so a range of addresses you can think of it as. Now what we can do is identify which scopes in the DHCP server are not actually being used. Now the way we do that is we load in a DHCP configuration file. Now we support the DHCP configuration file for Alcatel-Lucent DHCP. We also support the ISC DHCP.conf file, which you can obtain from Infoblox boxes. You can also manually type in the start and end address of each range. We can specify the date at which we want to check whether any scopes were used. So for instance, what we're doing here is we're checking for any scopes that have not been used since the 1st of January. We hit generate. Let's see what happens. And here we go. What we find on our DHCP server is there's actually 22 rows here. You can see the start and end address is the same for the majority of entries. That's because our DHCP server, our particular DHCP server, the start and end address are typically, when they're the same, it's typically for a manual DHCP or bootp entry. So what we've got here is basically fixed or reserved addresses, as I think Microsoft call them, and that are not being used or not been seen to be used since 1st of January. And there's an entry down here. There's actually a range here, 10 from 100.10 to 100.20, where no traffic's been seen. A similar kind of report is basically subnets rather than individual scopes. So if you've got a big DHCP server with hundreds or maybe even thousands of subnets managed, rather than looking at the individual scopes, we can just get a breakdown of the subnets that are not being used. And again, what we find is that 192.168.100, that subnet is not actually being used. The last report we've got is top DHCP clients. So this gives us a list of the busiest clients, and as usual we can break down by node, so we can see which DHCP server is responsible for these clients. And we can also change the period as well, so for instance we can go back to yesterday and look at the busiest DHCP client. This could be useful because sometimes we've seen, for instance, VoIP phones, like from Cisco, spewing out loads and loads and loads of DHCP packets when they've not been properly configured, and what this would do is identify those particular clients. That's pretty much it for the built-in DHCP reports in DDAM.